Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UAP, UFO news from everywhere and anywhere. So, are abductions by extraterrestrials real? Can multiple experiencers, all reporting similar encounters, be imagining it all? I came across this case in Bedtime Stories. It was pivotal in bringing awareness of abductions to the Australian public. On August 8th of 1993, Kelly and Andrew Cahill were driving home after attending a barbecue hosted by one of their friends. They sat with their friends for a few hours before finally heading home around midnight. Their journey took them along Belgrave-Hallam Road, which stretches along the mountains of southern Australia. They made their way through the rolling countryside with ease, looking forward to retiring to their beds. At some point along their route, they spotted what Kelly described as a blimp rising out of the distance. Slowing down, they kept their eyes on this strange object as it drew closer and realized it was actually disc-shaped, hovering at about double the height of the treetops. It drew fast on them, emitting a dazzling orange glow. They couldn't take their eyes off it as they peered at dark figures standing tall behind what appeared to be windows around the object's outer rim. Kelly had just enough time to tell Andrew to look at the people in the windows before it suddenly disappeared under the waning moon. They continued for another mile or so before noticing a blinding light in the middle of the road. The closer they moved toward it, the more they realized it appeared to be a screen of pure white light draped across the landscape ahead of them. Kelly raised her hand to shield her eyes as they drove into it. She was unable to see anything beyond its radiance. The next thing she knew, the light had disappeared. But their car seemed to be much further along the road, and Kelly immediately wondered if she had blacked out. When the couple returned home, Kelly noticed a mysterious geometric marking below her navel, a red equilateral triangle, the sides of which were about 10 millimeters in length, or 0.39 inches in length. Several layers of skin within this marking appeared to have been burned away. The couple also discovered that they returned home an hour and a half later than they should have, meaning they were 90 minutes off their journey. They couldn't account for being exhausted and they didn't think too much of it. But the next morning, Kelly in particular began to feel that something was off. Over the next few days, she started a long and heavy menstruation, even though her next cycle was not due for a while. This was accompanied by daily nauseating migraines, which she experienced on and off for about 6 weeks. They sought out medical treatment, and doctors were able to detect an infection in her womb. Further tests were carried out, including sonograms, but nothing would yield an answer. She was then hospitalized, and only after being placed on a strong course of antibiotics did her symptoms begin to abate. As for her migraines, the doctors performed a CAT scan looking for any signs of trauma, but again, nothing was detected. She was simply given painkillers and discharged. So eventually Kelly's memory came back, and along with it, all the details of what really happened that night. On the night in question, after driving through the mysterious curtain of light, Kelly eventually recalled that they pulled off the road and parked next to a large open field. But what awaited them in that field, they could never have imagined. A colossal craft the size of a 3-story building and as wide as an Olympic swimming pool hovered in the air a short distance away. The two of them stepped out of their vehicle, and it quickly became apparent that Kelly and Andrew were not the only ones that had stopped to observe the strange object. 2 other cars had pulled up about 100 or so meters away, or 330 feet away. A man and 2 women were in the closest of these vehicles, and another man who was traveling alone was a bit further away. They all stood there, exhilarated by this rare opportunity to witness something so extraordinary. Kelly and the others just looked on in amazement. But then a tall, dark figure appeared beneath the craft, with a large group of other dark figures standing behind it. Slowly, Kelly's enthusiasm turned into a brooding uncertainty, and it turned into a sour feeling in the pit of her stomach. She stated that this sensation was like a low-frequency wave, so dense and profound that it became a physical weight on her. She was spellbound and lost control of her senses and suddenly went mad with absolute terror. She desperately tried to free herself from what she described as an almost hypnotic trance, but no matter how much she fought to secure her own sanity, there was nothing she could do. The dark figures possessed bright red eyes that were disproportionately large in comparison to their heads. They then split up and headed towards each separate gathering of people. They glided across the field towards them. One group charged after Cahill and her husband. Another sped after the party further down the road. An electric blow then struck Kelly at her solar plexus, knocking the wind out of her lungs and sending her flying onto her back. Struggling for breath, she attempted again and again to sit up, convinced she was about to die. Suddenly, Kelly was unable to see. There was nothing but darkness as she was overwhelmed by an intense nausea. She sat up screaming for Andrew. Nearby, she could hear Andrew demanding to be released. Completely terrified, Kelly vomited. She then felt something examining her. The next moment, she and her husband were back in their car, driving down the road in silence. After that encounter, there was a thorough investigation. Kelly would later seek the assistance of UFO researchers who would conduct the most thorough UFO investigation in Australia's history at that time. The Cahill case would be pivotal in bringing this subject into the public eye. For 18 months solid, the location of the incident was intensely probed. Researchers divided several acres of the field into 1-meter blocks with pegs and tape. Samples were taken from the ground. Aerial surveys were carried out using infrared photography, and magnetic readings were logged by a portable magnetometer. The ground scans uncovered a 20-meter triangular shape in the field. Initially, it was thought to be an impression, but this turned out not to be the case. A carcinogen known as pyrene was instead discovered, which is a chemical found in coal mines, even though no coal mines were located anywhere near the field. Kelly is then visited by these very same extraterrestrials for the next 5 months. For 5 months following the event, Kelly would be visited 4 more times by one of the frightening beings she had witnessed. She described these visitations in a strange way. She couldn't see the entity, but could feel it in other ways. She felt as if she was being pulled by a nearby presence which spoke to her and told her not to panic. But despite its assurances, she felt the same profound horror she had experienced on the field during her abduction. She would see the entity standing over her before it disappeared, right before her eyes. Aside from Kelly's visits by the ET, both Kelly and her husband Andrew had anomalies occur in their household. They had bizarre electrical disturbances in their home. Kelly related how appliances and lights would turn on by themselves, and that she would receive static shocks through things which were not otherwise conductive, such as soil, wood, and rocks. The most incredible of these anomalies occurred when the engine of her car started on its own. despite the vehicle having still been locked and the kill switch activated. The whole experience was very damaging to the couple psychologically, and Andrew in particular avoided talking about his encounter. But one day, all of a sudden, he opened up to Kelly and admitted that he had had past experiences himself. For many years, he wouldn't divulge his recollection of it until reluctantly he admitted to Kelly that not only did he remember his experience, but also that he'd had several UFO encounters prior to it himself. The other experiencers that encountered these ETs, along with the Cahills, admitted to also having very similar experiences. So, unbeknownst to the Cahills, the other people who had stopped to observe the strange object that night had also reported their experiences to researchers. Kelly Cahill had never met any of the occupants of the other vehicles, either before or after the event. And yet, the similarity between each of the accounts is astonishing. On the night in question, the vehicle closest to them, parked about 100 meters away, was driven by a man named Bill. He was accompanied by his wife, Glenda, and a family friend named Jane. Another car was parked a further 30 meters or 98 feet beyond theirs, and this was occupied by a government law department employee named Dave. And Dave and all the other experiencers that night decided to draw illustrations of what they had seen. Neither group was made aware of each other's drawings until much later, and there's an uncanny resemblance between all of their sketches. They all depicted a circular craft lined with many windows and naturally dark figures. All their sketches, even though they were drawn separately, all pretty much showed the same thing. They all showed circular crafts with surrounding windows. They also all showed the dark figures to be very similar. And of the 6 witnesses, Kelly, Glenda, Jane, and Dave each discovered a triangular burn mark on their body located just below the navel. Andrew and Bill, however, had no such wound. The 2 other women had also suffered gynecological problems similar to Kelly's in the immediate aftermath. And Glenda, in particular, would recall waking up in a strange room, strapped to a table, and being examined by a tall entity dressed in a dark cloak. This sounds eerily similar to the creature described in Kelly's subsequent visitation experiences. The only difference in the accounts is that Glenda, Jane, and Dave all reported hearing a humming sound from the craft and blacked out immediately after crossing the road to see what was in the field. Although they saw the figures, they don't recall them having bright red eyes, as Kelly described. On the other hand, the Cahills didn't hear any humming and seemed to have remained conscious for a while longer than the other 4 witnesses. Kelly would go on to say that the eyes of the figures glowed red only after they began to glide towards them. Finally, the accounts by all 6 experiencers were backed up by reports from local residents who said they saw a strange object in the sky about the same time the encounter occurred. I think the fact that there were 6 experiencers and in addition multiple local resident witnesses gives a lot of credibility to this case. So was it really an abduction or just a bizarre mass hallucination between all 6 experiencers? But that also begs the question of why the local residents also reported a bright, vivid orange object in the sky that same night. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.